As I've mentioned with virtually all of my previous reviews of the Saw movies in the franchise, I would not recommend checking out this particular review unless you have seen all of the Saw movies up until number 5. That kind of goes without saying, but it does still need to be said because, by definition, we will cover spoilers for previous movies due to where the plot is by this point in the franchise. So, if you're okay with that, or if you've seen the movies up until number 5, then of course, proceed. If you haven't, I'd recommend doing so and coming back. Now, as far as the later Saw movies go, I've mentioned before that I enjoy the later ones for different reasons to the initial ones. 2, 3 and 4 are the best, in my opinion. The first one is the most commonly loved, understandably so, but personally I think that 5 and 6 in particular have merit in as much as you get to see more of Saw's backstory, why he is the way he is, the reasons why he does what he does, and it humanises him more. It doesn't necessarily make you root for him or justify his actions, because at the end of the day he is just a crazy guy with a god complex, but it allows you to understand what brought him to the point of becoming Jigsaw. Now, at the same time as that, you do cover the fact that he has replacements. Various people who he was training, of course Amanda being the initial one, but also various others as well, such as Hoffman. And of course in the 5th movie you spend plenty of time with Hoffman covering his various traps, and as I've covered before, I don't like Hoffman's Jigsaw as much as the original. I doubt many people would, and the reason why is because he's just not an intimidating character to me. He is a serviceable villain, but he's just not Jigsaw. Now, the choice of killing Jigsaw off so early in the series may be a good idea, but I don't really understand why they chose to do that. It does certainly fit into the broad story, so in that way I don't dislike the choice. It just seems like a strange thing to do, to kill off the main villain, such a good villain as well, so early on. Now, as I've said, I do not consider Hoffman's Jigsaw to be a bad villain. I just think that he has the same problem as Amanda, and that is he allows his personal emotions to cloud his vision to make him less efficient, and also it kind of defeats the purpose of being Jigsaw, because with the original Tobin Bell Jigsaw, you could see why he was doing what he was doing. And again, these later films, in particular I would say 5 and 6, really give you more of an insight into that. With Hoffman, it's not the same. He's just more of a traditional killer, and he happens to use traps and the name Jigsaw because it's a good foot in for him to do those things. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. As I said, it's just that Jigsaw is elevated above that. He's not just another killer. The cops may view him as such in the films, but he really isn't, and you get the opportunity of seeing it from his side of the curtain, and that allows you to see that he's not just another killer. He truly believes that what he's doing is right, and that kind of makes him like a really dark version of something like a Punisher or a Batman character, where he believes so strongly in what he's doing that there is no option for him. There is no question that what he's doing is right. It just is. And that makes him deadly. And I've covered before in these reviews for the Saw films that makes him singular and focused in his goal. That makes him dangerous, and it makes him very effective and very efficient. With Hoffman, that just isn't there. Now, with this movie as a whole, I've mentioned before as well that I like the even movies in the series more than the odd ones. I said that I didn't enjoy the 5th one as much. I don't think it's a bad film, I just didn't like it as much as the others. This one was more of a high point for me. Now, that being said, I don't like it as much as number 2, and I don't think it's as good as number 4, but I do think it is a higher point, certainly a higher point in the later of the series. Of the movies which are 5, 6 and 7, 6 is undoubtedly the best for me personally, because you get a great mix of the kind of trap setups, the more group-oriented tests that you saw, for instance, in Saw 3, and for the most part, I would say characters which you actually care more about. You don't just want them all to die, as you do in some others. I would say in number 5, that can kind of skirt that issue where do you really want these people to live? Whereas in this one, they're certainly not rose-tinted characters, but you might actually want some of them to survive. And that's good, because you need that to happen. They're not just gore porn movies, which is what many people falsely assume that Saw movies are. And to make the movies work, you have to have characters that you root for. Otherwise they are just gore porn. And that's kind of why I think some people think that they are, because some of the later characters in particular, some of which we'll cover in the episode 7 review, aren't necessarily that likeable. And that hurts the series. In this one though, I would say the characters are better. Not the best, but better. Certainly more than good enough. Now, as far as the plot itself, if you've checked out any of my other Saw reviews, you'll probably know that I don't really go into the individual movie plots all that much. And the reason why is because Saw is one big movie. It just happens to be cut up into multiple parts. And as such, if you go into any of the films too much, you will spoil stuff not only that's to come, but also that's already happened. And as such, I like to keep the plot breakdown that I give as simple and as standoffish as possible, so that you just know what you need to know and the rest you enjoy the journey for. So what is the case with this one? Well, the main story, the overarching plot of this particular film, revolves around an insurance salesman, a very high up insurance salesman who had dealings with Jigsaw in the past and is now in one of Hoffman's traps, along with a number of other people. And the traps are inventive, they're interesting, there's a good level of gore which will satiate those people who want that kind of thing. And I'm not saying that I don't. I just like the fact that Saw doesn't need the gore, it's more of an addition on top of the story. And as I said before, this particular installment gives you even more nuggets into the backstory of Saw, and that's always a good thing. When you're talking about what I would call the real Jigsaw, not Hoffman's Jigsaw, that's always welcome from me. You could just pick out the moments featuring Tobin Bell's Jigsaw and kind of put them together into a supercut, and they would be kind of a cool movie on their own. Maybe they'll do that someday, I don't know. But overall, I didn't find the rest of the film boring, certainly not. Those are just by far the highlights. What then about our individual breakdowns? Well, first of all, as we always do, we've got the story and plot. And for the story and plot in number 6, I'm actually going to give it a 7 out of 10. And to put that into perspective, this is actually the only movie in the entire franchise so far that I'm giving a 7 to. None of them have had that score before. They've either been under that or over. That means that I'm putting it higher than Saw 5 and Saw 1 and Saw 3, but slightly lower than 2 and 4. But those of you who know my opinion of the Saw franchise will know that that's not necessarily a bad score, considering how much I love 2 and 4, 2 in particular. As far as the characters and their motivations, I'm going to give it a 6, and that's actually similar to a couple of others. That's the same score as in Saw 5 and Saw 1, so that gives you some idea of what to expect. Although I'm giving it a 6, I do consider the characters to be more likeable than in Saw 5, but the reason why I'm not giving it a higher score is because that would not be fair to Saw 2 and 3, where the characters are better, and I gave them a 7 because of it. So overall, it certainly justifies being a 6 rather than a 7, but at the same time, you can expect more from the characters in this film because they are better characters. Now, as far as the visuals, the special effects, makeup, practical effects, all that kind of stuff, well, you're pretty much always guaranteed to have a good level of gore, and not necessarily realistic gore always, but you are pretty much always guaranteed a decent level of blood and gore, some more than others, and as is attested to by the fact that my favourite of the entire franchise is number 2, which is by far the least gory. I am not necessarily a gore fiend when it comes to the Saw films. I love myself a bit of gore, I really do, but I like the fact that the Saw movies, despite what people think, don't actually need to rely on that. The later ones do fall into that trap more, but it doesn't ruin them for me. Not for the most part at least, but we'll get to that in my Part 7 review. Now, this particular movie I'm giving a 10 on the visuals for, because the practical effects, the makeup, the traps, everything about it is top notch. You get exactly what you're expecting from a Saw film. Lots of blood, lots of gore, plenty of traps, and also good decisions, good choices, and the way people go through those traps keeps it interesting. As far as the audio, the soundtrack, the music, well, as I've mentioned before, I give pretty much all of the Saw films the same rating of 6 out of 10, because the theme tune is cool, lots of people know it by heart, it's a good theme tune, the good soundtrack overall, the sound effects are pretty good, it's very easy for a gory film to really go over the top with sound effects, stuff like squelching and squishing of body parts and blood, and Saw has never done that. And I do actually appreciate that. It's nice not to go over the top in that regard, because it can really take you out of it. Now, as far as the entertainment factor, the rewatchability, the group watch factor, the rewatchability on your own, I'm going to give it a 7. And that's actually 1 point higher than I gave to number 5, and again, is the only 7 that I'm giving to any Saw film in the franchise. All the others are either higher or lower than that. And once again, this is actually a time where I'm putting Saw 6 as just under my two favourites of Saw 2 and Saw 4 with regard to points. I gave them both a 9 in that regard, this one a 7. So in other words, higher than Saw 5, 3 and 1. So certainly not bad. I did think that this was a lot better than it easily could have been for such a late movie in a franchise. Usually by the time you get to the 6th, 7th, 8th movie in a series, they really do start getting garbage. And although some people may think that the Saw movies are, I personally don't. I actually would say that I like elements of all of the films, and I mean literally all of them, even the Saw movies that I don't like. There are things in them. Maybe visuals, certain traps, certain characters, certain choices, certain ways of placing the camera or taking a shot or writing a particular point of story that I may have liked, even though I don't like the whole film as much overall. To me, every single movie does have redeeming features, no matter how small. With this one, it's not small at all. It's very easy to find multiple things to like if you are a Saw fan. If you're not, well, if you're not a Saw fan, you probably won't like any of the films to that degree. But if you are, there's definitely a lot here to keep you interested. And overall, as a tabulation of our 5 individual categories put together, that means that I'm giving Saw 6 a pretty decent, actually, 3.6 out of 5. And to put that into some perspective, that is higher, again, than the first one, the third one, and the fifth one, but lower than the second and the fourth. So, pretty good. It's basically bang on centre of the group. Better than half of them, worse than half of them. So, not bad at all. Overall, if you are a Saw fan and you've checked out the first, second, third, fourth and fifth film, then I think you'll enjoy this one too, perhaps even more than some of the previous ones. But that's it for this particular review. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.